Remember that I am not gay. I do not naturally sound gay. And they're changing my voice covertly. So this video is about wife scriptures. Proverbs 12:4. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. If the wife, whether it is a city, a people, an actual literal wife, or anything of importance, anything that's important like those things, if she is disgraceful, right, doesn't have grace but has disgrace, then she isn't truly a wife. Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. I connect this to Proverbs 31:10, a wife of noble character who can find. She is worth far more than rubies. So what it's saying is, he who finds a true wife, a wife of noble character, finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. Proverbs 19:14. Houses and wealth are inherited from parents. Okay, referring to like the house of David. It's not literally a house, it's like their family grouping, those who are in the refuge of the house of David, in the Spirit of God. And remember, David's just a character in the story. The Jews are not the central people of God, it is the righteous. You see that in Galatians 3:28, for example. Okay, so houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent or a diligent or a woman who scrambles to do what is right, a prudent wife, is from the Lord. So again, houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Proverbs 25:4. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Proverbs 27:15. A quarrelsome wife is like the dripping of a leaking roof in a rainstorm, right? The storm of the Lord is coming down, and if your wife wasn't right with God, if your grouping, right, your people, okay, wasn't right with God and isn't right with God, then you are on the receiving end of eternal punishment. Proverbs 17:1. Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. So notice that it had said early on, right, that a wife of noble character is extremely important, is infinitely greater than rubies. It also has said that he who finds a wife of noble character finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. And seek ye first the kingdom of heaven is what it said in the New Testament in Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness. So a wife of noble character is going to seek me, Christ, and my righteousness. There's no other way to look at it. And people have no right to interfere. Now I want you to consider 2 points here and we'll wrap this up. Point number 1. They are preventing the most appealing and righteous person that ever will live from having the things he needs to win over attractive females that need to be trained to extremely desire him in a situation where he doesn't have those things. So again, they are preventing me, the most appealing and righteous person that will ever live, from having the things that I need to win over attractive females. Like money, for example. A platform. Okay, and these attractive females need to be trained to extremely desire me in a situation where I don't have money or a platform, targeted or not. Now this is being done on a planet where females are being terrorized and coerced into not dating me. That's why they're called tricks. They're tricked into being scared of man instead of God. Okay, they're called chickens. They're afraid of man instead of God. Before they even wrap their minds around the power of God, they're too busy being afraid of man to ever get to the right solution. The soul you shun, the solution. The answer, the Alpha and where's the Alpha? And where also means the great one, right? Har-where in ancient Egypt, right? The Greeks in the West came together and decided the word Har-where was the word for Horus the Great One, if I'm not mistaken here. Okay. So point number 2. almost every single male that is handsome or close to handsome, which is basically none these days except for me, okay, because there's a difference between petty and pretty and handsome. Hand of God, some thing, some total. So again, almost every single male that is, we'll say, attractive or close to attractive would never reject the most beautiful and righteous woman that ever lived. So if they were single and the most beautiful and righteous woman that ever lived was to come up to them, okay, they wouldn't reject her. They would not reject her. Some dumb gold-digging whore would say something like, you just like her because she's pretty? Yeah, most of them would not reject her because she's the most attractive. Okay? But the two go together when we're talking about the pinpointed most beautiful woman that ever lived. So why did females that are attractive reject me when I am the most righteous person ever possible, especially when they did it at a time when I was the most handsome person ever possible? And I still am, but I'm an older version of that. So back in when I was 34 or so, I had achieved a certain degree of handsomeness that goes far, far beyond other people. And it's even plain enough for the average person to see and understand it. Okay? If you compare my picture to, say, Tyson Beckford, okay, who is considered one of the most most pretty and attractive models, male models of all time. All right, that's why he's so famous, right? You would see that I was significantly more attractive than he ever was. He looked like a pretty spoiled person who gets his way, who's giggling like an immature little boy. In my picture, I clearly looked divine, righteous, handsome, forged from martial arts strikes that are potent. While the opposition view resorts to making funny noises and doing funny things and acting like children instead of manning up. How can a pretty boy, forged from privilege and cowardice, be more handsome than the top martial arts ever possible, the most righteous person ever lived, when it's even called good looking and handsome for the hand of God, the image of God, good looking, God looking? Okay? So it's not just obvious in terms of just, a secular artist point of view. If you're not racist, universal. But when you look at it religiously, it's clear cut. And so it is if a female was to fit the description. Say she was a mulatto, okay, and somebody's a white supremacist, okay. He'd maybe be the exception and wouldn't date her, but almost certainly he would. So how evil are the attractive females in our society when the version of it that involves a woman choosing the most handsome and righteous man that ever lived, okay, has been proven, it has been shown that they refuse to date me. Okay? So in other words, for those of you who are a little confused, now I know I put in a way that's a little confusing. I'm being fumed as a kind of hard idea to portray. I was going to say the reverse of it, but it confuses it to say the reverse of it. But if it was women instead of men, basically, why don't they choose me? Okay, there's people who would give up their fucking sight, their arms and their legs. They give up everything you can imagine to date the most attractive female that ever lived, who's the most righteous. So it's one example of how, when it comes to divine matters, romantic justice, God is love, justice in regards to romantic relations, that they get an F. Okay, I'm not trying to bash women. Okay, let me give an example of how it's fair to say this. There was a bunch of females who were about to be chewed to death by a bunch of wolves, and some bootlicking cowards. I don't want to hurt their feelings by telling them what they're doing is wrong and that they're making a stupid mistake and that you are right. Okay? So he's not going to tell them. And there's another guy saying, hey, you're about to get chewed to death by wolves. I told you that was stupid to do that. Stop, run, do something about it. Who's trying to help them? Only females with no sense would have their feelings hurt when someone pointed out they're right and tries to save them. You see what I'm saying? And so it is with pointing out this. You're not using your heads as a group, not just as individuals, but as a group altogether. You are shunning the most righteous person that ever lived and ever will live. And that's part of the reason why you have a red government right now, when everyone knows conservatives, generally speaking, are people who clearly approve of rape and almost certainly rape women without even the beginning of an excuse for it. These are good old boys passing chicks around. Look at the history of colonialism. Look at the wars. Militaries are disproportionately conservative all throughout Western history. almost entirely conservative. And they rape women like more than anyone else. They pass them around ruthlessly, acting like a fucking demon. Even they do it at times, they do it to their own soldiers, like in Fort Hood. I'm not saying all of them. But you should know that I'm right. And you should know that they shouldn't be offended by the fact that I'm pointing this out. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible is Proverbs 8. And in Proverbs 8:35, it says, "He who finds me," referring to wisdom, obtains life, receives favor, what have you. Proverbs 8 starts off, "You should know that I'm right and that they shouldn't be offended by the fact that I'm pointing this out." Okay, so one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is Proverbs 8. And in Proverbs 8:35, it says, "He who finds me," referring to wisdom, obtains life, receives favor, what have you. Proverbs 8 starts off by saying that wisdom calls aloud, understanding raises her voice. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a bed or a bushel or a table. Okay, so the wise do not withdraw like monks. They go out there and they say what needs to be said, and they have the heart to face the roaring lion, the devil, in the city squares or anywhere else. And anywhere else. So the woman, the wife, refers to a lot of things at once. Think of also in terms of the bread of the presence of God, right? The two will become one flesh. And the bread, which stands for the presence of God, and in the New Testament, Christ says it refers to his flesh that he gives to save them. Christ also says there's a character in the story that he's going to the Father. Well, they'll see him no longer. His presence won't be there. And then he'll come back later. And keep in mind that what comes to mind at first is basically incorrect. Okay, because this was not God's plan. God's plan wasn't for the Spirit of God to leave and then come back. Okay, that's something that humanity did. God gave them a choice, and they chose to kill Christ. They chose to kill the righteous. This wasn't something that is being done to complete the Jews or something, and anyone who's dumb enough to roll with them, that's fucking retarded. That is stupid as hell. So when the two become one flesh, they become one presence. Wisdom becomes one with your soul. And wisdom, as it says in Proverbs 8, dwells together with insight, with prudence, with power, spiritual power, martial power, counsel, and sound judgment. Now, if you have any questions, put in the comments. They make it so I articulate myself a little bit differently than I otherwise would. And they change the sound of my voice to try to make it so it sounds gay, because there's a bunch of gay-sounding Democrats and Republicans and corporatists and social club people everywhere. And there's a bunch of guys who seem a little less gay than them, trying to pretend that they're the man, trying to benefit from it, which is stupid. How many do you think of Tonya Harding as the greatest figure skater that ever lived? Or is she a complete idiot who was dumb enough to sabotage people? Okay? It's stupid to sabotage people over a sport. And it's stupid to sabotage people over who's seen as ideal and to infuriate God at you and your offspring. That's why the Bible describes what they're doing as devouring their offspring.